My neighbor is suing me for poisoning her dog. I'm deathly allergic to dogs and haven't been within 50 feet of one in a decade. The process server handed me the lawsuit papers on a Thursday morning while I was leaving for work, and I actually laughed out loud when I read the first paragraph. Diane Shepard, my neighbor of 3 years, was suing me for $85,000 in damages, claiming I'd intentionally poisoned her golden retriever Biscuit with antifreeze-laced ground beef thrown over our shared fence. The irony was so absurd, I had to read it twice. I'm so allergic to dogs that I carry 2 EpiPens everywhere I go. I can't be within 50 feet of a dog without my throat closing up. The last time I was near a dog, 10 years ago, at my sister's house, I ended up in the ICU for 3 days with anaphylactic shock so severe, the ER doctor said I was minutes from death. I've structured my entire adult life around avoiding dogs, and now I was being accused of getting close enough to one to murder it. The process server stood there awkwardly as I stared at the papers, my hands beginning to shake, not from fear, but from pure, disorienting confusion about how reality had bent itself into this impossible shape. I'd been living at 2847 Oakmont Drive for 3 years when Diane moved in next door with Biscuit. The house had been empty for 6 months before she bought it, a foreclosure that she'd gotten for a steal and spent 4 months renovating. I'd been friendly during the renovation, waving when I saw her, once helping her carry lumber from her truck when the delivery guys dumped it in her driveway. She'd seemed nice enough, a woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and the kind of perpetual smile that made you think she volunteered at animal shelters and baked cookies for neighborhood kids. She moved in properly in April, and that's when I met Biscuit. The dog bounded into my yard the first week, off-leash and enthusiastic, heading straight for me while I was checking my mailbox. I'd seen it coming and ran inside so fast I dropped my mail all over the porch. Diane had come rushing over, apologizing, scooping up the dog while I stood behind my screen door trying to breathe normally. "I'm so sorry," she'd called out. "He's friendly, I swear, just excited about the new place." I'd opened the door a crack and explained about my allergy, how severe it was, how I couldn't be near dogs at all. I'd shown her the medical alert bracelet on my wrist. She'd been understanding, promising to keep Biscuit in her yard to make sure he never got loose again. For 3 years, that arrangement had worked. I'd seen Biscuit in her fenced backyard, heard him barking occasionally, but he'd never come near my property again. Until apparently, according to this lawsuit, I decided to poison him. I called in sick to work and sat at my kitchen table reading the entire legal document. The complaint alleged that on the evening of September 15th, I had willfully, maliciously, and with premeditation, thrown ground beef mixed with automotive antifreeze over the fence into Diane's backyard. Biscuit had eaten it and died within hours, suffering organ failure consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning. Diane was suing for the cost of emergency veterinary care, the value of the dog, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The document included an affidavit from Diane describing how she'd found Biscuit seizing in the backyard at 9 p.m., how she'd rushed him to the emergency vet, how the veterinarian had confirmed antifreeze poisoning. It included another affidavit from a neighbor, someone named Leslie Vargas, who lived 2 doors down, claiming she'd seen me acting suspiciously near the fence line the evening of September 15th. It included photographs of the partially eaten ground beef found in Diane's yard, photographed before the police had come to collect it as evidence. Wait, police. I scanned further and found another section explaining that Diane had filed a police report, that there was an open investigation into animal cruelty, that criminal charges might be forthcoming depending on what the investigation revealed. My throat went dry. This wasn't just a civil lawsuit. I might face criminal charges for killing a dog I couldn't physically get near without dying. I pulled out my phone and searched for lawyers. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I'd never needed a lawyer before, never been sued, never been accused of anything more serious than a parking ticket. I found a firm downtown that specialized in civil litigation and called immediately. The receptionist transferred me to an attorney named Catherine Voss, whose voice was crisp and professional. "Mr. Sterling, tell me what happened." I explained the situation, the lawsuit, my allergy, the absurdity of the accusation. Catherine listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay, this is manageable. Do you have documentation of your allergy, medical records, hospital visits, anything that proves you can't be near dogs?" I told her about the hospital stay 10 years ago, about my allergist appointments, about the EpiPens I kept everywhere. "Good, that's our foundation. We'll need to get those records along with an affidavit from your allergist explaining the severity of your condition. But Mr. Sterling, I need to ask you something directly. Did you poison that dog?" The question hit me like a slap. "No, absolutely not. I can't get near dogs. How would I even poison one?" Catherine's voice softened slightly. "I believe you, but I needed to hear you say it. People do strange, self-destructive things sometimes. We'll fight this. My fee is $350 an hour with a $5,000 retainer. Can you manage that?" I thought about my savings, about the money I'd been putting away for a down payment on a house. "Yes, I can manage it." That afternoon, I drove to my allergist's office without an appointment and begged the receptionist to let me speak to Dr. Neil Hartley, the allergist who'd been treating me for 8 years. She made me wait 40 minutes, but Dr. Hartley finally came out and took me into an exam room. He was in his 60s, gray-bearded, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd spent decades dealing with people's irrational immune systems. "David, what's wrong? Sarah said you seemed panicked." I explained the lawsuit, the accusation, the dead dog. Dr. Hartley's eyebrows rose steadily as I talked. "That's absurd. You'd be hospitalized or dead if you got close enough to a dog to feed it anything. Your allergy is among the most severe cases I've treated. Even secondary exposure, being in a room where a dog has been, causes reactions. The idea that you could approach a dog with food is medically impossible." I felt tears of relief building. "Can you write that down? Can you provide records for my attorney?" Dr. Hartley nodded immediately. "I'll prepare a detailed affidavit describing your condition, the history of reactions, the severity. I'll include your hospital records from the incident 10 years ago. David, whoever poisoned that dog, it wasn't you. Any competent court will see that immediately." But as I left his office, I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach, because if I didn't poison Biscuit, someone else did, and whoever it was had gone out of their way to make it look like me. I started going through September 15th in my mind, trying to remember everything about that evening. It had been a Friday. I'd worked until 6 p.m., stopped at the grocery store on my way home, and arrived back at my house around 7:30. I'd made dinner, watched Netflix, and gone to bed around 10:30. I hadn't been outside after dark. I certainly hadn't gone near the fence line between my property and Diane's. But Leslie Vargas had claimed she saw me acting suspiciously near the fence. Why would she lie? I barely knew Leslie. We'd exchanged pleasantries a handful of times, but we weren't friends. I'd never had any conflict with her. I pulled up Google Maps on my phone and looked at the satellite view of our neighborhood. Leslie's house was 2 doors down from mine, on the same side of the street. Her backyard didn't have a direct view of my fence line with Diane's property. To see someone at that fence, she'd have to be deliberately watching from a specific angle, unless she was lying. The thought made my chest tight. What if this wasn't about me at all? What if someone had poisoned Biscuit and decided to frame me because my allergy made me an easy target? No one would believe I could get near a dog, which meant I had a perfect alibi, which also meant I looked suspicious if someone was determined to blame me. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with understanding what had happened. I filed for copies of the police report through a public records request. I drove past Diane's house multiple times looking for security cameras or any evidence of what might have occurred. I contacted my own security system company to pull footage from my doorbell camera for September 15th. The footage showed exactly what I remembered. Me arriving home at 7:33 p.m. with grocery bags, going inside, and not emerging again until the next morning. No suspicious behavior. No trips to the fence line. Nothing that suggested I'd done anything wrong. But the police report, when it finally arrived, was damning in different ways. It included witness testimony from Leslie Vargas claiming she'd seen me in my backyard around 8:45 p.m., crouching near the fence line for several minutes, and making throwing motions. The report included photographs of the poisoned meat found in Diane's yard, clearly showing ground beef mixed with a bright green substance consistent with antifreeze. It included the veterinary report confirming ethylene glycol poisoning, describing Biscuit's suffering in clinical detail that made me feel sick. And it included a supplemental statement from Diane claiming I'd always seemed to hate Biscuit, that I'd complained about barking noise, that I'd made comments about wishing the dog would just disappear. None of that was true. I'd never complained about Biscuit. The dog barely barked. I'd never said anything negative about him to anyone. These were complete fabrications. But reading them in an official police report made them feel real, made them feel like facts that would be difficult to disprove. Catherine Voss met with me 3 days after I'd hired her, in her downtown office that overlooked the river. She'd spread documents across her conference table. My medical records, Dr. Hartley's affidavit, the police report, the lawsuit complaint, my doorbell camera footage. "Okay, here's where we are," she said, tapping a pen against her legal pad. "The medical evidence is overwhelmingly in your favor. No jury will believe you could poison a dog you're deathly allergic to, but the prosecution, both civil and potentially criminal, will argue that you used a method that didn't require direct contact. Throwing poison over a fence, they'll say, could be done from a safe distance. We need to dismantle their witness testimony." She pulled out Leslie Vargas's statement. "This woman claims she saw you at the fence line at 8:45 p.m. Your doorbell footage proves you were inside your house, but they'll argue the footage isn't continuous, that you could have gone out a back door not covered by the camera." I'd thought of that. My back door is visible from my neighbor on the other side, the Kims. Maybe they saw something, or didn't see something, that proves I wasn't outside. Catherine nodded. "We'll talk to them. We'll also subpoena Leslie Vargas's phone records. If she was really watching your house that evening, maybe she took photos or videos. If she didn't, that suggests she's lying about what she saw. And David, I need you to think hard. Why would anyone frame you for this? Is there someone who benefits from you being blamed?" That question haunted me for days. I couldn't think of anyone who'd want to hurt me. I'd lived a quiet, deliberately conflict-free life. I worked as a systems analyst for a mid-sized insurance company, had no enemies at work, no ex-girlfriend or ex-wife with an axe to grind. I kept to myself, paid my bills, didn't cause problems. The only remotely controversial thing about me was my allergy, and that was hardly something that made people want to destroy me. Unless. A thought occurred to me that seemed crazy, but wouldn't leave. What if this wasn't about me at all? What if someone wanted to hurt Diane, and I was just collateral damage? What if someone had poisoned Biscuit and then fed Diane a story about me being responsible, knowing she'd believe it because of my allergy and my history of avoiding her dog? But who would want to hurt Diane? I barely knew her. I started doing what I probably should have done months ago. I started paying attention to my neighbors. I started watching who came and went, who talked to whom, what relationships existed in this neighborhood that I'd been oblivious to. I saw Leslie Vargas walking her own small dog, a terrier mix, every evening. I saw the Kims bringing in groceries, their teenage daughter practicing violin by an open window. I saw Diane in her yard, obviously grieving, planting flowers where Biscuit used to play. And I saw a man I didn't recognize visiting Diane's house multiple times over the course of a week. He'd arrive in a black Audi, let himself in with a key, stay for hours. The way Diane greeted him suggested intimacy, a relationship, a boyfriend, maybe, or an ex-husband, someone who had access to her house and her yard, someone who could have poisoned Biscuit and then convinced Diane to blame me. I mentioned this to Catherine during our next meeting. There's a man visiting Diane Shepherd. I don't know who he is, but he has a key to her house. Could he be involved? Somehow? Catherine made a note. Let's find out who he is. You have a right to depose Diane as part of the civil suit. We can ask her directly about her relationships, about who had access to her property, about whether anyone else might have wanted to harm her dog. But David, we need to be strategic. If we accuse someone without evidence, we could make things worse. Right now, the medical evidence is our strongest defense. Your allergy is documented, severe, and makes the accusation physically implausible. That might be enough to get the civil suit dismissed. The criminal investigation is more concerning, but without physical evidence tying you to the crime, I doubt the DA will file charges. But 3 days later, Catherine called me with news that made my stomach drop. David, the DA's office just contacted me. They're filing misdemeanor animal cruelty charges. You need to turn yourself in for booking and arraignment. They're offering a plea deal. Plead guilty to misdemeanor animal cruelty, pay a $2,500 fine, and do 40 hours of community service. No jail time. They'll recommend dropping the civil suit as part of the plea. I felt like I'd been punched. Catherine, I didn't do this. I can't plead guilty to something I didn't do. Her voice was careful. I understand. But you need to know what fighting this means. It means months of legal proceedings. It means paying legal fees that could reach $50,000 or more. It means the possibility of conviction if the jury doesn't find the medical evidence compelling enough. It means a criminal record. The plea deal is objectively the safer option. I thought about my savings, my job, my reputation. I thought about standing in court and being labeled an animal abuser. No, I'm not pleading guilty. We fight this. The arraignment happened on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. in county court. I wore a suit and stood next to Catherine while a judge read the charges. 1 count of misdemeanor animal cruelty, maximum penalty of 1 year, in jail, and a $5,000 fine. The judge asked how I pleaded. Not guilty, Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The judge set a trial date for 8 weeks out and released me on my own recognizance. As we left the courthouse, Catherine pulled me aside. Okay, now we investigate. We have 8 weeks to build a defense, which means we need to find out who really poisoned that dog. I'm hiring a private investigator. His name is Vincent Russo, former police detective, 20 years experience. He's expensive but thorough. He'll look into Diane Shepherd, Leslie Vargas, and anyone else who might be involved. You need to stay away from both of them. Don't talk to them. Don't approach them. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation. Let Russo handle it. Vincent Russo called me 2 days later. His voice was gruff, seasoned. Mr. Sterling, I've started background checks on your neighbors. Diane Shepherd is 53, divorced, works as a dental hygienist. No criminal record. Finances are shaky. She's behind on her mortgage payments and has significant credit card debt. Leslie Vargas is 48, married, works in real estate. No criminal record, but she's been involved in several property disputes with neighbors over the years. Nothing major, but she has a pattern of conflict. The man you saw visiting Diane's house is named Gordon Fletcher. He's her ex-husband. They divorced 4 years ago. Messy split. Accusations of infidelity on both sides. He's remarried now, but still has some financial entanglement with Diane related to the house. I'm going to dig deeper into Fletcher. Sometimes domestic situations have angles people don't see. Over the next few weeks, my life became a strange, split existence. During the day, I went to work and pretended everything was normal, though HR had been notified of the charges and I'd been put on a performance monitoring plan, which was code for, we're watching you for signs you're a liability. In the evenings, I met with Catherine and reviewed the evidence Russo was gathering. He'd pulled phone records showing dozens of calls between Diane and Leslie in the weeks leading up to Biscuit's death, far more than seemed normal for casual neighbors. He'd found social media posts from Gordon Fletcher complaining about Diane's spending habits, about how she'd squeezed him dry in the divorce. He'd discovered that Diane had taken out a $15,000 life insurance policy on Biscuit 6 months before the dog died through a specialty pet insurance company. That detail made Catherine sit up straight. A life insurance policy on a dog? That's unusual. Most people just have regular pet insurance for medical costs. A life insurance policy pays out if the dog dies. That's a financial motive. But motive meant nothing without proof. Russo kept digging. He interviewed neighbors, asking casual questions about the night Biscuit died. He got security camera footage from houses on the street, piecing together a timeline. And finally, 4 weeks before trial, he found something that changed everything. Mr. Sterling, I've got footage from the Kim family's doorbell camera. They didn't realize it, but their camera has a wide-angle view that captures part of Diane's backyard and your fence line. I had them pull the footage from September 15th. You need to see this. Catherine, Russo, and I met at Catherine's office to watch the footage. The video quality wasn't great, shot in night vision mode with grainy green tinted images, but it clearly showed the fence line between my property and Diane's. The timestamp read 8:43 p.m. We watched in silence as a figure appeared on Diane's side of the fence, someone medium height, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap. The figure was carrying something, reached over the fence, and appeared to throw something into the yard. Then the figure moved quickly away, out of frame. That's not you, Catherine said immediately. The body type is wrong, the height is wrong. You're 6'1". This person is maybe 5'7", 5'8", and they're on Diane's side of the fence, not yours. They're throwing something into her yard from inside her property. I felt dizzy with relief and confusion. So someone inside Diane's property poisoned Biscuit, who has access to her yard. Russo pulled out his notes. Diane herself, obviously. Her ex-husband, Gordon Fletcher, who still has a key. And according to my interviews, Leslie Vargas. Apparently, Diane gave her a spare key months ago because Leslie sometimes dog-sat Biscuit when Diane worked late shifts. The pieces were clicking together, but the picture still wasn't complete. Why would any of them poison the dog and blame me? Catherine tapped her pen thoughtfully. Let's think about this logically. Diane benefits financially from Biscuit's death because of the life insurance policy. But would she poison her own dog? Possibly, if she needed money badly enough. Gordon. Fletcher might want to hurt Diane emotionally by killing something she loves. Leslie Vargas is the one who provided false testimony about seeing you at the fence. Why would she do that unless she's protecting herself or someone else? Russo suggested we focus on Leslie. Her testimony is the weakest link. She claimed she saw you at 8:45 p.m., but the Kim family's footage proves someone else was at the fence at 8:43 p.m. She either made a mistake about the timing or she deliberately lied. I'm going to interview her more directly, see if she'll talk to me. But Leslie refused to speak to Russo. Her husband, a beefy man named Ronald Vargas, told Russo in no uncertain terms to stay away from his property. Catherine filed a motion to depose Leslie as part of the civil case, forcing her to answer questions under oath. The deposition was scheduled for 2 weeks before trial. When Leslie arrived at Catherine's office for the deposition, accompanied by her own attorney, she looked nervous. Catherine started with basic questions, establishing Leslie's relationship with Diane, confirming that she had a key to Diane's house, asking about September 15th. Ms. Vargas, you stated in the police report that you saw David Sterling at the fence line between his property and Diane Shepard's property at approximately 8:45 p.m. on September 15th. Is that correct? Leslie's attorney whispered something to her. She nodded. Yes, that's correct. Catherine pulled out a still image from the Kim family's doorbell footage. This footage shows someone at the fence line at 8:43 p.m. That person is approximately 5'7" or 5'8", wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap. Mr. Sterling is 6'1". Is it possible you saw this person and mistakenly identified them as Mr. Sterling? Leslie's face went pale. Her attorney called for a break. After 15 minutes, they returned, and Leslie's attorney made a statement. My client wishes to revise her previous testimony. She may have been mistaken about the date and time. She's been under significant stress and may have confused different evenings. The deposition ended soon after, but Catherine was energized. She's lying, and she knows we know she's lying. She's protecting someone. We need to find out who. That evening, Russo called me with more information. I've been looking into Leslie Vargas's finances. She's in real estate, and business has been slow. She's 6 months behind on her mortgage. But here's the interesting part. 2 weeks after Biscuit died, she made a deposit of $7,500 into her personal checking account. The deposit slip says, consulting fee, but I can't find any record of her doing consulting work. It looks like someone paid her $7,500 shortly after she gave false testimony incriminating you. My heart raced. Who paid her? Russo's voice was grim. I'm working on it. Bank records are harder to access without a subpoena. But I have a theory. Gordon Fletcher is a financial advisor. He has access to money and he has motive to hurt both Diane and you. What if he paid Leslie to poison Biscuit and frame you? Diane gets hit with the loss of her dog and the stress of a lawsuit. You get hit with criminal charges. Fletcher stays clean and maybe even gets to play the supportive ex-husband, helping Diane through her trauma. It was twisted. but it made sense. How do we prove it? Catherine had been listening on speaker. We get Gordon Fletcher's financial records. I'm going to subpoena them as part of the civil discovery process. If he made a payment to Leslie around the same time she deposited $7,500, that's our smoking gun. The subpoena for Gordon Fletcher's financial records was met with immediate resistance. His attorney filed a motion to quash, arguing the records were irrelevant to the civil case. Catherine countered by explaining the connection between Fletcher, Leslie, and the false testimony. The judge took a week to rule, and when he did, he sided with Catherine. Fletcher had to produce bank statements and financial records for the 3 months surrounding Biscuit's death. When the records arrived, Catherine and I went through them line by line. Most of it was mundane: mortgage payments, grocery stores, gas stations. But on September 18th, 3 days after Biscuit died, there was an entry that made Catherine circle the page with red pen. Personal loan repayment to L. Vargas, $7,500. Gordon Fletcher had paid Leslie Vargas exactly $7,500, 3 days after Biscuit died and 1 day after Leslie gave her statement to police accusing me. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Catherine immediately filed an emergency motion to dismiss the charges, attaching the financial records and the Kim family's doorbell footage. She argued that the evidence clearly showed someone else had poisoned the dog, that Leslie Vargas had been paid to provide false testimony, and that I was being wrongfully prosecuted. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing for the following morning. At the hearing, the prosecutor, a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Haynes, who'd been handling the case with obvious reluctance, reviewed the new evidence and stood up to address the judge. Your Honor, in light of the new evidence presented by the defense, the state moves to dismiss all charges against David Sterling with prejudice. We will be opening an investigation into possible criminal conspiracy involving Leslie Vargas and Gordon Fletcher. I felt my knees go weak. Just like that, it was over. The criminal charges were dismissed. The judge granted Catherine's motion and added a sharp rebuke to the prosecution for not investigating more thoroughly before filing charges. As we left the courthouse, Catherine put a hand on my shoulder. The civil suit will be dismissed too, now that the criminal case has collapsed. But David, you should consider filing your own lawsuit. You've been falsely accused, publicly humiliated, forced to pay significant legal fees. You have grounds for malicious prosecution and defamation. I thought about it as we walked to her car. Part of me wanted to fight back, to make Diane and Leslie and Gordon pay for what they'd put me through. But another part of me just wanted to move on, to put this nightmare behind me and rebuild my life. Let me think about it, I told Catherine. Right now, I just want to breathe. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged. Detective Frank Robbins, who'd been assigned to investigate the conspiracy, called me with updates. Mr. Sterling, we've arrested Leslie Vargas and Gordon Fletcher. Vargas broke during questioning and admitted Fletcher paid her to poison the dog and frame you. Apparently, Fletcher wanted revenge on his ex-wife for the divorce settlement. He knew about your allergy, knew you'd be an easy scapegoat. Vargas needed money, so she agreed. She used ground beef she'd bought at a grocery store, mixed it with antifreeze from Fletcher's garage, and threw it over the fence into Diane's yard, using the key Diane had given her for dog sitting. Then she told police she'd seen you at the fence, figuring your allergy would make you seem suspicious enough to investigate. I felt sick hearing the details. What about Diane? Was she involved? Detective Robbins' voice was sympathetic. No, Diane was a victim too. She genuinely believed you'd killed her dog. Fletcher manipulated her, played the supportive ex-husband, probably hoping to get back into her life by helping her through the trauma. She's devastated by the truth. She wants to apologize to you if you're willing to hear it. I wasn't sure I was. The damage Diane's accusations had caused, the stress and fear and financial burden, that wasn't something an apology could erase. But I also understood she'd been manipulated, used as a pawn in her ex-husband's sick revenge scheme. A week later, Diane knocked on my door. She looked small and broken, her eyes red from crying. David, I know words aren't enough. I know I've destroyed your peace and your sense of safety. Gordon used me. He used my grief to hurt you. I should have questioned it. Should have realized the accusation didn't make sense given your allergy. I'm so sorry. I stood in my doorway, looking at this woman who'd been my neighbor for 3 years, and felt a mix of anger and pity. You didn't just accuse me, Diane. You built an entire case against me. You included lies about me complaining about your dog, about me making threats. Those weren't things Gordon told you. Those came from you. Diane's face crumpled. I was hurt and angry. When Gordon suggested you'd poisoned Biscuit, it made a sick kind of sense because you always avoided my dog. I convinced myself your avoidance was hatred instead of medical necessity. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm dropping the civil suit formally, and I'm paying your legal fees. It's the least I can do. 3 months after the charges were dismissed, I was sitting in my backyard on a Saturday afternoon when my phone rang. It was Catherine Voss. David, I wanted you to know that Gordon Fletcher and Leslie Vargas both pleaded guilty this morning. Fletcher got 18 months in county jail for conspiracy and animal cruelty. Vargas got 12 months and probation. They're both facing civil penalties too. Diane Shepard is suing them for fraud and emotional distress. I felt a grim satisfaction. Justice hadn't been quick, but it had arrived. Thanks for letting me know, Catherine, and thank you for everything you did. I don't think I'd have survived this without you. Her voice was warm. You survived because you were innocent and you had proof. That medical documentation of your allergy, that was ironclad. Without it, this could have gone very differently. You should send Dr. Hartley a thank you note. I hung up and looked around my yard, the fence line where someone had committed a crime and tried to pin it on me. Thought about how easily my life could have been destroyed by false accusations, by people willing to lie for money or revenge. I thought about Biscuit, a dog I'd never touched, but whose death had nearly ruined me. And I thought about the strange fragility of truth, how it can be buried under lies and manipulation, but how eventually, with enough digging and persistence, it rises to the surface. I still carry 2 EpiPens everywhere I go. I still avoid dogs with the same careful vigilance I've maintained for a decade. But now I also carry copies of my medical records, proof of my allergy, documentation that I've learned can mean the difference between justice and destruction. Because in the end, that's what saved me. Not my word, not my character, but paper proof that my body would have killed me if I'd done what they said I did. Truth needed evidence to survive, and I'd barely had enough. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.